The monitor was still showing a heartbeat. That was the first thing I noticed when I realized the room was empty. The bed was made. The sheets were flat. The call button hung untouched at the side rail. But the heart monitor beside it kept tracing a slow, steady line, each beep calm and patient, like it hadn't noticed anything was wrong yet. I stood there longer than I should have, listening to it, trying to understand how a machine could be so sure someone was still there when I was staring at a space where a person should have been. I worked the night shift at a regional hospital. Not a big city one, but not small either. The kind of place that never fully sleeps, but never fully wakes up. The halls stay dim. The lights buzz softly. Sounds travel farther than they should. That night, I was assigned to the 4th floor. Medical surgical. Long-term patients. People who stayed long enough that you learned their routines, their breathing patterns, the way they pressed the call button when they were embarrassed to ask for help. Room 417 was Mr. Halvorson's. He'd been there for weeks. Elderly, frail, trouble swallowing, trouble sleeping, trouble with his heart, which was why he was hooked to more machines than most. He rarely spoke, but when he did, he looked directly at you, like he was measuring how much you were really listening. Earlier that evening, when I'd checked on him around 11, he'd asked me something that stuck. "Do they still come at night?" he said. I asked who. He didn't answer, just closed his eyes like he hadn't said anything at all. I charted it as confusion and moved on. By 1:30 a.m., the floor had settled into its quiet rhythm. For pumps clicking, distant footsteps, a TV murmuring behind a closed door. I was doing my rounds when the monitor at the nurse's station gave a soft alert. Not an alarm, just a notification. Room 417. Heart rate stable. Movement detected. Movement. That caught my attention because Mr. Halvorson hadn't moved much at all lately. I grabbed my clipboard and walked down the hall. The lights were low, night mode. The kind that makes everything look slightly unreal, like you're walking through a place that's been abandoned but not emptied. When I reached his room, the door was open. The bed was empty. At first, I assumed he'd gone to the bathroom. Patients do that, even when they shouldn't. I stepped inside and checked the small bathroom. Light off. Empty. I came back out and looked at the bed again. The sheets were tucked in. The pillow was still shaped like a head had been resting there not long ago. The heart monitor beeped softly beside it. I checked the leads. They were still connected. The wires lay across the mattress, trailing off the side, their ends dangling slightly, like they'd been unplugged from something that wasn't there anymore. I felt that slow tightening in my chest that comes when something doesn't match what your brain expects. I stepped back into the hallway and looked both ways. Empty. Quiet. Mr. Halvorson? I called, keeping my voice low. Nothing. I went back to the nurse's station and checked his chart. No discharge. No transfer. No test scheduled. Nothing. I radioed security. They asked me the usual questions. Was he confused? Was he mobile? Had I checked the bathrooms? While I waited, I went back to his room and stood there again, listening to the monitor. It felt wrong to silence it, like turning it off would make something final. Security arrived 10 minutes later. 2 guards, flashlights, calm voices. They searched the floor, stairwells, supply closets, the waiting room downstairs. Nothing. By 2:30, the charge nurse was involved. A code was called, but quietly. No overhead announcement, just radios and footsteps. Eventually, administration made the call to mark him as missing. The monitor was disconnected. The room was cleared. I finished my shift in a fog. They found Mr. Halvorson the next morning. He was in a room that had been closed for renovation. Down the hall, room 403. That room hadn't been used in months. The door was always locked. The lights off. No bed. No equipment. They found him lying on the bare floor, positioned neatly, hands folded over his chest. No injuries. No signs of struggle. Time of death was estimated around 1:45 a.m. Around the same time his heart monitor had shown movement. I was questioned, of course. We all were. They reviewed footage. The cameras showed him leaving his room at exactly 1:32. He moved slowly, steadily, like he knew exactly where he was going. He didn't look confused. He didn't look scared. He walked down the hall, and then the footage glitched, just for a few seconds, enough to miss him passing the renovation room. They chalked it up to a system error. After that, things were quiet for a while. The kind of quiet that makes you think it's over. But if you've worked nights long enough, you know better. About a week later, I was back on the same floor. Same shift, different patients. Room 417 was occupied again. A middle-aged woman recovering from surgery. Around 2 a.m., I was charting when I heard it. A slow dragging sound. Not loud, not urgent, just steady. I looked up. The sound was coming from the hall. I stepped out and saw someone walking toward me from the far end. An older man, hospital gown, bare feet. For a moment, my brain tried to make it normal. Another patient wandering. It happens. Then he stepped under the light. It wasn't Mr. Halvorson, but it was close enough that my stomach dropped. Same build, same posture, same way of holding his arms slightly away from his sides, like the air felt heavier around him. He stopped a few feet away from me. "Do they still come at night?" he asked. His voice was flat, calm, like he was asking about visiting hours. I told him to come with me, that I'd help him back to his room. He shook his head slowly. "They don't like the lights," he said. Before I could respond, a call bell rang behind me. Loud, sudden. When I turned back, the hallway was empty. Security reviewed the footage again. No one there. They suggested I was overtired. That night shift messes with perception. That sounds travel. That memory fills in gaps. I wanted to believe them, but things kept happening. Monitors showing movement in empty rooms. Call bells lighting up with no one pressing them. Patients asking questions that didn't quite make sense until later. One man asked me if I could close his door because they stand in the doorway when it's open. A woman insisted on keeping her TV on all night because the glow keeps them back. I started paying attention to the time. Most of it happened between 1:30 and 2:30, the same hour Mr. Halvorson disappeared. One night, I stayed late in the supply room, restocking slowly, listening to the building breathe. The lights flickered once, twice. I heard footsteps past the door. Slow, bare. I didn't open it. If you were there, you might have told yourself the same thing I did. That it was just another patient. That someone else would handle it. That nothing good comes from stepping into the hall alone at that hour. The footsteps stopped right outside. There was a pause, then a soft knock. Not urgent, not demanding. Patient, patient, patient. I stayed still. After a long moment, the footsteps moved on. Later, when I checked the cameras, the hallway outside the supply room was empty the entire time. The renovation room stays locked now, but sometimes when I walk past it, I hear a faint beeping from inside. Slow, steady, like a heart monitor doing its job. They still come at night. I don't know who they are. I just know I don't leave my patients alone during that hour anymore. And I never silence a monitor if it's still showing a heartbeat. Story 2. The elevator stopped between floors. Not abruptly, not with a jolt. It slowed the way it always did, then settled into a stillness that felt intentional, like it had chosen that spot on purpose. The floor indicator flickered, then went dark. I was alone inside, the hum of the cables fading until there was nothing but my own breathing and the faint buzz of the emergency light overhead. I work nights as a patient transporter. Most people don't think about us, which is exactly how the hospital prefers it. We move patients from one place to another quietly, efficiently, usually after visiting hours, usually when things are calmer. That's what I told myself that night. Calm. Routine. The call had come from radiology just after midnight. ICU transfer. Imaging needed urgently, but stable enough to move. That already felt wrong. ICU patients don't usually get wheeled around at that hour unless something is going downhill. The nurse handed me the chart without looking at me. Room 9, she said. Don't stop. I asked what she meant. She hesitated, then repeated it. Just don't stop. Room 9 in the ICU was at the end of the hall. Curtains half drawn, lights dimmer than the others. The patient was a man in his 30s, intubated, sedated. No family, no personal items, just machines and numbers. As I unlocked the bed wheels, one of the monitors gave a soft warning tone. Not critical, just enough to make you notice. The nurse leaned in and adjusted it, then stepped back. Straight to imaging, she said, and back. I nodded. We rolled out into the hall. The ICU doors closed behind us with a soft seal, and the sound changed instantly. Hospitals sound different at night. Bigger, hollower. Every movement echoes longer than it should. The elevator was waiting when I pressed the button. Doors open. Empty. I pushed the bed inside and stepped in after it. The doors closed. I pressed B2. That's when it stopped. Between floors. At first, I did what you're trained to do. Checked the panel. Pressed the button again. No response. The patient monitor was still running. Heart rate steady. Oxygen stable. I picked up the phone inside the elevator and called security. Static. Then a click. Then nothing. I tried again. Nothing. I leaned against the wall and waited. Elevators get stuck sometimes. It happens. That's when I noticed the reflection. The mirrored wall opposite me showed the bed, the machines, and me standing there. But the patient's reflection didn't line up. His head was turned toward me. In reality, his face was angled straight up, mouth tube taped in place, eyes closed. In the reflection, his eyes were open. I stared at it longer than I should have, trying to convince myself it was just the angle, just distortion. Mirrors and elevators do weird things. Then his reflection blinked. The monitor beeped once, a little faster than before. I turned away from the mirror and looked directly at him. Eyes closed. Still, I exhaled slowly, feeling embarrassed at myself. Long shifts mess with you. Your brain fills in gaps. The elevator lurched slightly, then started moving again. The lights brightened. The floor indicator flickered back on. B2. The doors opened. Imaging was quiet but staffed. The tech didn't comment on the delay. Just helped me slide the bed into position and hook the machines back up. As they worked, I noticed something odd. The patient's wrists had faint red marks on them, like pressure marks, not from restraints, from something narrower. I asked the tech if he knew what happened to the guy. He shrugged. Came in earlier tonight. Found unresponsive at home. No trauma, The scan finished quickly. Too quickly, it felt like. The tech avoided looking at the patient's face. "Let's get him back," he said. On the way out, I passed a janitor mopping the hall. Older guy. He paused when he saw the bed. "Don't stop," he said quietly. I looked at him. "What?" He shook his head and kept mopping, like he hadn't said anything at all. The elevator arrived right away this time. Same one. I hesitated before pushing the bed inside. If you were there, you might have done the same thing I did. Told yourself you were tired, that everyone had weird superstitions, that the fastest way out of the moment was straight through it. I stepped in and pressed the button. The doors closed. Halfway up, the elevator slowed again. This time, it didn't stop completely. It hovered. The lights dimmed, but didn't go out. The monitor's beeping changed. Faster. Irregular. I checked the patient. Still sedated. Still strapped in. The mirror caught my eye again. The reflection showed his head turning. Slowly. Deliberately. His mouth moved around the tube, like he was trying to speak. I stepped closer to the bed and looked at his face. His eyes were open now. Not wide. Not panicked. Just open enough to be aware. He was looking straight at me. The monitor spiked. I reached for the emergency button and pressed it hard. "Hello? We need assistance." Static crackled through the speaker. Then a voice came through, faint and distorted. "Which floor?" I told him. There was a pause. "That's not possible," the voice said. "You haven't moved." The elevator shuddered and resumed its ascent. When the doors opened to the ICU level, 2 nurses were waiting like they'd been standing there the whole time. They didn't ask questions. They helped me roll the bed out and back into room 9. The moment the bed crossed the threshold, the patient's eyes closed. The monitor stabilized. One of the nurses leaned over him and checked his vitals. Then she looked at me. "Did you stop?" she asked. I told her about the elevator. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected that answer. "Did he wake up?" she asked. I hesitated, then shook my head. She studied my face for a long moment, then turned away. I went back to my desk and sat there, hands shaking slightly, pretending to fill out paperwork. Around 2 a.m., a code blue was called in the ICU. Room 9. I didn't go back in. By morning, the patient was gone. Not discharged. Not transferred. Gone. No chart. No bed assignment. Room 9 was empty, curtains open, equipment unplugged. I asked the charge nurse about it. She frowned. Room 9 hasn't been used in weeks. I told her I'd transported a patient from there just hours earlier. She looked at me carefully. "Are you sure it was 9? I was sure. I checked the logs later. No record of a transport. No imaging order. No elevator malfunction. But security footage showed something strange. At 12:23 a.m., the elevator doors opened on B2. The bed rolled out on its own. No transporter visible. The camera glitched for a moment, then cut back to an empty hallway. I transferred off night shifts not long after that. Daytime only. But sometimes when I ride the elevator alone, it slows between floors. Just for a second. And in the mirror, I swear I see someone lying on a bed behind me, eyes open, waiting for me to stop. Story 3. The call light was already on when I arrived. That shouldn't have been possible because the room hadn't had a patient in it all night. The red glow spilled out from beneath the door, steady and patient, like someone inside had been waiting for a long time and finally decided to ask for help. I stood there with my hand on the handle, listening. Nothing. No coughing. No movement, no TV, just the faint hum of the hospital around me and that silent red light demanding attention. I was working night shift as a CNA then, floating between floors wherever they needed extra hands. That night, they had me covering the older wing, the part of the hospital built decades ago, before anyone cared about natural light or comforting colors. The rooms were smaller, the ceilings lower. The air always felt a little stale, no matter how clean everything was. Room 312 had been empty since the evening. I knew that because I'd helped strip the bed myself. Fresh sheets, clean pillow, call button reset, door left closed. Yet here it was, lit up. If you've worked nights, you know that ignoring a call light isn't an option, even when it feels wrong, especially when it feels wrong. I knocked once, lightly, then pushed the door open. The room was empty. The bed was untouched, sheets smooth, the pillows still creased from being folded earlier. No wheelchair, no four-pole. The call button lay on the bed, its cord stretched just enough that it could reach the side rail. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at it. Then I did the practical thing. I reached over and pressed the reset. The light went off. I closed the door and told myself that was the end of it. 10 minutes later, it came back on. This time, I felt it before I saw it. A subtle awareness, like someone had said my name softly from behind me. I turned, and there it was again, glowing under the door. I checked the assignment board. Still empty. No late admission. No transfer pending. I opened the door again. Still empty. But something had changed. The temperature. The room felt colder than the hallway. Not dramatically, but enough that my arms prickled. The air smelled faintly metallic, like old blood or iron, though the room had been cleaned thoroughly. The call button was back in the same place. On the bed, I reset it again, slower this time, watching the light go dark. As I turned to leave, I noticed the bathroom door. It was open. I was sure it had been closed earlier. I leaned in and flicked the light on. Empty, clean, dry, nothing out of place. I shut the bathroom door and left, telling myself someone must be messing with the system. Old wiring, faulty switch, night shift paranoia. At around 1:45 a.m., the charge nurse asked me to do round again. Check rooms, make sure everyone was settled. When I reached the end of the hall, room 312's light was on again. Not blinking. Solid. I stopped walking. There was a part of me that wanted to pretend I hadn't seen it, that someone else would handle it, that it wasn't my problem, but it was my assignment. I approached slowly this time, listening for anything at all. My footsteps sounded too loud in the quiet hall. I opened the door. Someone was sitting on the bed, not lying down, sitting upright, hands folded neatly in their lap. For a split second, my brain refused to process it. The figure was thin, wearing a hospital gown, bare feet dangling just above the floor. An elderly woman. Her back was to me. "I'm coming," I said automatically, the words coming out before fear could stop them. "Sorry about the wait." She didn't turn. I took a step closer and noticed something wrong with the bed. The sheets weren't wrinkled, not creased by weight. They were perfectly smooth, like she wasn't actually pressing into them. My mouth went dry. "Ma'am," I said. She tilted her head slightly, just enough that I could see her profile. Her skin was pale, almost gray. Her hair thin and white, pulled back loosely. Her eyes were open, staring straight ahead. She spoke without looking at me. "They forget," she said. Her voice was quiet, calm, like she was stating a fact. Forget what? I asked, though every instinct told me to leave the room immediately. She slowly turned her head toward me. Her eyes were cloudy, unfocused, like cataracts. But I knew she could see me. "They forget to come back," she said. I glanced at the door, then back at her. "Who?" Her lips twitched, almost a smile. "The ones who leave." The call light suddenly went off on its own. The room lights flickered once. When they steadied, the bed was empty. The woman was gone. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own feet, and rushed into the hallway. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear in my ears. The hall was empty, silent. I went straight to the nurse's station and told the charge nurse what I'd seen. I expected skepticism, maybe concern about my mental state. Instead, she went very still. "What did she look like?" she asked. I described her. The gown, the hair, the way she spoke. The nurse nodded slowly. "Room 312, she said. "Figures." I asked what she meant. She hesitated, then sighed. "That room used to be palliative overflow. Years ago, before renovations." My stomach tightened. "There was a patient there," she continued. "Long term, no family. Dementia." She used to call light constantly. Not for pain, not for help, just so someone would come in. I asked what happened to her. The nurse didn't answer right away. "She passed during a staffing shortage," she said finally. "Night shift." Her call light had been on for a long time. I felt cold all over. They documented it as unavoidable. Equipment delays, staffing ratios, no negligence officially. But after that, staff started reporting issues with that room. Call lights, temperature changes, the sense that someone was there when they shouldn't be. "So why is it still empty?" I asked. The nurse looked at me. "Because anyone who stays in that room longer than one night starts calling out sick." I didn't go back down that hall for the rest of the shift. Around 3 a.m., another CNA did rounds instead. When she passed the station, she looked pale. "Did you reset 312? She asked. The charge nurse shook her head. The CNA swallowed. I saw someone sitting on the bed. No one responded. At the end of my shift, as daylight crept in and the hospital slowly woke up, I walked past room 312 one last time. The door was closed. The call light was off. I reached for the handle, then stopped. If you were there, you might have told yourself what I told myself. That seeing it again wouldn't help. That some things don't need confirmation. I left. A week later, room 312 was reassigned. A post-op patient, middle-aged man, in for observation overnight. By morning, he'd check himself out against medical advice. When asked why, he'd only said one thing. "She kept asking me to press the button for her," he said. "But every time I did, no one came." Story 4. The pager went off even though my name wasn't on the schedule. That was the first thing that felt wrong. I was sitting in the break room at 2 in the morning, lights dimmed, chewing on a stale sandwich I brought from home. Night shift habits. You eat when you can, not when you're hungry. My shift had technically ended at 1:30, but I'd stayed late to finish charting. Everyone does it sometimes. The pager on the table buzzed once. Sharp, demanding. I looked at it, confused because I hadn't signed out yet, but I also hadn't signed in for any on-call rotation. The screen showed a room number, 506. I stared at it longer than I should have. The 5th floor was psych overflow. Locked unit. You don't just get paged there by accident. I stood up and went to the nurse's station, assuming it was a mistake. The charge nurse wasn't there. Her chair was empty. The phones were quiet. I checked the board. Room 506 was marked vacant. No patient. No assignment. No notes. The pager buzzed again. Same room. Same sharp insistence. If you've worked in a hospital long enough, you know the feeling when routine breaks in a way that doesn't make sense. Not an emergency. Not chaos. Just wrong. I told myself I'd walk up there, confirm it was nothing, and go home. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. The hum was louder. The lights flickered once between floors, just enough to make my stomach tighten. When the doors opened on 5, the hallway was darker than the others. Night lights only, the kind that turn corners into blind spots. The psych unit doors were closed, as always. Keycard access only. I swiped my badge. The doors unlocked. That was wrong too. They're never unlocked unless staff is inside. The unit was quiet. Too quiet. No murmuring voices. No pacing footsteps. No TVs playing softly behind doors. I stepped inside and let the doors close behind me. That's when I noticed the smell. Not antiseptic. Not cleaning solution. Something stale. Like old fabric and breath that's been trapped in a room too long. Room 506 was at the far end of the hall. As I walked, I noticed something else. The observation windows on the doors were covered. All of them. That's against policy. Patients need to be visible at all times. I slowed my pace, listening. Nothing. No movement. No voices. Just a faint buzz of lights overhead. I stopped outside 506. The call light above the door was on. Steady, not flashing. Someone inside was waiting. I knocked lightly. Hello. No response. I tried the handle. Unlocked. I pushed the door open. The room was empty. No bed. No mattress. No restraints. Just a bare room with a chair bolted to the floor and scuff marks on the walls. The call light panel was active. I stared at it, trying to understand how that was possible. Then the chair scraped. Just a little. I spun around. The sound had come from behind me, from the doorway. I stepped back into the hall. The chair in the room across from 506, 505, was rocking slightly. Like someone had just stood up. I hadn't heard that door open. I approached slowly and looked inside. Empty. The chair was still moving, rocking gently back and forth. I reached out and steadied it. The metal felt cold. Too cold. That's when I heard breathing. Soft. Slow. Coming from behind me. I turned. A man was standing in the hallway. Hospital scrubs. Bare feet, wristbands still on. He was facing the wall, not moving. I cleared my throat. Sir, he didn't respond. I took a step closer. Can I help you back to your room? He spoke without turning around. They said if I waited, someone would come. His voice was flat, exhausted. Which room are you assigned to? I asked. He lifted one hand and pointed down the hall. 506. My chest tightened. That room is empty, I said carefully. He shook his head slowly. No, he said. It's where they put me when I won't sleep. I asked his name. He didn't answer. I asked how long he'd been waiting. He paused, then said, longer than last time. Something about that made my skin crawl. I tried the radio clipped to my collar. Charge nurse to 5th floor, I said. Static answered me. No reply. The man finally turned his head slightly. I caught a glimpse of his face. His eyes were open too wide. Bloodshot. Unblinking. They told me not to leave, he said. But it gets loud when I stay. What gets loud? I asked. He smiled faintly. The quiet. The call light over 506 turned off. The lights in the hall flickered. When they steadied, The man was gone. I stood there, heart pounding, listening for footsteps, for doors, for anything. Nothing. I went back into 506 and unplugged the call panel, pulled the cord from the wall. It went dark. I left the unit quickly, swiped out, and rode the elevator down without stopping. I didn't look at my reflection. I didn't check my phone. I just wanted to be in my car, away from the building. The next night, I asked around, carefully, quietly. One of the older nurses finally told me. Years ago, before renovations, the 5th floor psych unit had been used for long-term holds. Patients deemed non-responsive to treatment. Sedation heavy. Isolation rooms. Room 506 had been used more than the others. There was a patient who stayed there on and off for years. Severe insomnia. Psychosis worsened by lack of sleep. He complained constantly that the silence was too loud. One night, during a staffing shortage, he'd been left alone too long. They found him in the hallway in the morning, standing, facing the wall. Heart stopped. After that, the room was closed, officially repurposed, unofficially avoided. I told myself it was just a story, a way to explain glitches and fatigue. Then, a month later, I was scheduled for a double shift. Around 2 a.m., my pager buzzed. Room 506. I wasn't even on the 5th floor that night. I checked the board. Still vacant. I didn't go. The pager buzzed again. Then again. Finally, it stopped. The next morning, security reported that the psych unit doors had unlocked themselves overnight. The cameras showed the hallway. Empty, except for one thing. At exactly 2:12 a.m., a man appeared at the far end. Bare feet. Hospital scrubs. He walked to the wall outside 506 and stood there, not moving, waiting. They couldn't explain how he got in. They couldn't explain where he went. They asked if anyone had been paged. No one answered. I don't stay late anymore. And if my pager ever goes off after my shift ends, I don't look at the room number. Because somewhere in that building, someone is still waiting for someone to come. And the quiet is getting loud again. Story 5. The body bag wasn't zipped all the way. That was the first thing I noticed when I signed the log. Just a few inches open at the top. Enough to show a sliver of skin beneath the plastic. Pale. Still. I stood there staring at it, pen hovering over the paper, try to remember if I'd left it like that earlier. I work nights as a hospital morgue attendant. It's not a job people ask questions about, and that's fine. The morgue sits in the lowest level of the hospital, past the supply cages and old storage rooms, where the air feels heavier and the lights never seem bright enough. Most nights are quiet. Transfer paperwork, temperature checks, occasional arrivals from floors. That night, I was alone. The day attendant had left in a hurry, muttering something about his kid being sick. I didn't think much of it. I clocked in at 11, did my rounds, and everything checked out. Until I saw the bag. I hadn't received a transfer call. No notification. No paperwork clipped to the clipboard. Yet there it was. One body. Drawer 3. I checked the tag tied to the zipper. No name. No wristband number. Just the date and time. 1:40 a.m. That was strange for 2 reasons. First, it wasn't even close to that time yet. Second, bodies don't arrive without documentation. Ever. I radioed upstairs. More checking on an unlogged arrival. Can someone confirm a transfer? Static. I tried again. Nothing. Sometimes reception gets spotty down here, so I didn't panic. I made a note on the clipboard and when to zip the bag properly. It's protocol. Respect. Order. As I reached for the zipper, I hesitated. The skin visible beneath the opening wasn't cold. Not warm, but not cold the way it should have been. I told myself it was just the ambient temperature, the lights, my imagination. I zipped the bag closed and slid the drawer shut. The room settled back into silence. Around 1:30, I started my routine checks. Temperature gauges, door locks, logs. When I reached drawer 3 again, my stomach dropped. The drawer was open, just a few inches. The bag was unzipped. I stood there, frozen, listening. The morgue has a sound when it's truly empty. A low hum, air circulation, nothing else. But now there was something new. A faint, uneven sound, like breathing. Slow, careful, controlled. I stepped back and reached for my radio. "Security to the morgue," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need someone down here." No response. The breathing stopped. I waited. Seconds stretched. My heartbeat felt too loud. If you were there, you might have told yourself what I did. That it was machinery. That refrigeration units make strange noises. That fear fills in blanks when you're alone too long. I stepped forward again and pulled the drawer fully open. The bag was sealed, fully zipped. I stared at it, trying to understand how it could have been opened moments earlier. Then the zipper moved, just a centimeter. On its own, I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the card behind me. "Hello," I said, immediately regretting it. The bag was still. No movement. I waited a full minute before approaching again. When I did, I noticed something else. The toe tag was gone. I checked the surrounding area. Floor, cart, desk, nothing. I decided then to leave the room and wait in the hallway until security arrived. Whatever was happening, I didn't want to be alone with it. I turned toward the door. It was closed. I was sure I'd left it open. I crossed the room quickly and tried the handle. Locked. My badge worked on the first try. The door clicked open. The hallway outside was empty. Too empty. No footsteps. No carts. No distant elevator chime. The clock above the exit read 1:39 a.m. I frowned and checked my watch. Same time. I stood there confused. Time doesn't stop in hospitals. It just doesn't. The radio crackled suddenly, loud enough to make me jump. "Morgue," a voice said, distorted. "Do not open." The transmission cut off. I went back inside. Drawer 3 was closed. I didn't touch it. I sat at the desk and watched the clock. 1:39, 1:39, 1:39. The second hand moved. The minute didn't. That's when I heard footsteps. Bare feet. Slow. Approaching from the back of the room. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The footsteps stopped behind me. A voice spoke close to my ear. They said this was the last stop. I stood up so fast the chair tipped over. The room was empty. Drawer 3 was open. The bag was gone. No plastic. No body. No tag. Just an empty metal tray. Faintly damp, like something had been resting there recently. The clock clicked. 1:40. The lights flickered. My radio crackled to life. Clear this time. Morgue. Security responding. "What's your status?" I didn't answer right away. I was staring at the doorway. At the floor. Bare footprints led from the drawer to the door. And then stopped. Security arrived minutes later. Real minutes. The clock moved again. Time behaved. They searched the area. Reviewed logs. Checked cameras. No footage of a body arriving. No footage of anyone leaving. They chalked it up to stress. Fatigue. A paperwork error from another department. Drawer 3 stayed empty after that. But sometimes when I'm down there alone, I hear the zipper. Slow, careful, like someone trying not to wake anyone. And every night, no matter what time I check it, the clock reads 1:39, just a little longer than it should. Which story stayed with you the longest? Let me know in the comments. New true horror stories are coming soon.